Hello, UNIV. All right, today's video is going to be about teacher feedback forms. All right, guys, anytime we have an IEP or a 504 meeting, you're going to have to fill this out. All right. It's important. It gives us a lot of information on the student. As an ESE team, we work with the student. We like to collaborate with you, but we're not in the classroom with you. And there are things that we don't know about the child that would help us with creating an IEP or a 504. It's important that we get all the data that we can so that when we come together for an IEP or a 504 meeting, that we can use all the data, all the information about this child holistically to make the best decision for what the child needs. So I'm going to kind of go through our new feedback form that we have. It is a 2-page, not front and back. It'll be 1-page front and back. And a lot of it is yes and no questions. So don't panic. I know that you're like, okay, don't panic. I promise. All right. So I'm going to go through it. The first one, what standards in math, reading, writing, and all academic areas does the student show weakness? Don't just write reading. Don't write math. Be specific. Johnny cannot do subtraction with regrouping. Sally struggles with inferencing when asked questions. Luana is able to find the answers if it's in the text, but is unable to come up with the answer if she has to come up with it on her own. I'm just coming out of the blue with what it could be. Rodrigo is able to do multiplication with fractions, but not with decimals. All right. The next one is standards specific in strength. Okay, now we're looking for the strong side. Like I said, Rodrigo can do multiplication with fractions. Sally can find the main idea in the story 90% of the time or 70% of the time. Percentages are helpful too. You may say Bobby can read, can answer cause and effects questions 70% of the time. That gives us an idea that, okay, Bobby is going the right direction. He's starting to understand and get the cause and effect, but he's not quite there because we're always looking for about that 80%. That's always kind of our sweet spot. But it lets us know that the child is heading the right direction versus Bobby can read or answer cause and effect questions 40% of the time. Ooh, that might be an area we want to look at. Okay, so it's important that you give us as much specific detail as you can. And remember that binder we talked about. If you haven't seen the video on the ESE binder, go back and watch that video. We talk about keeping student data, keeping their work. That's going to help you answer these questions. Also, NWEA scores, iReady scores, unit assessment scores, our new assessments that we're going to be doing 3 times a year with the state, all of that, the FAST testing, all of that's going to be used to help you answer these questions. Question 1 is, how well does the student work independently? And what does that look like? So you can answer, yes, the child interacts independently, or no, the child does not. Well, what does that look like? When is that happening? Chris can work independently when doing math assignments, but gets distracted and is constantly asking for help and standing up and coming to my desk during reading. Well, what's that going to tell us? He's doing really well in math, but we need to work on the how to ask for help during reading time. We don't just get up and go to the teacher's desk, raise our hand, ask a peer. Maybe we need to, when we're figuring the IEP out, maybe we need to put as an accommodation that he has a peer next to him that will help him and support him. So he's not constantly running up to your desk. Do you see how these questions are going to lead to understanding for the team to figure out what we need to do for the IEP? How often do you have to redirect the student? I want percentages or close to. I mean, I'm not expecting, 87.5% of the time the child, no. But if you say, you know what, I have to redirect the child 60% of the time in class, especially during reading or especially in the afternoon, because maybe it's an ADHD child and we're starting to see the medication is wearing off by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's going to give us that information. What does this redirection look like? Is it just go sit down? Which is fine. If that's the way you handle it in your classroom, go sit down. Or is the redirection, all right, Bobby, fine to see, maybe you say, I give explicit directions every time. Or maybe it's, we have a signal and I just raise my finger and they know to go back. Or touch my nose or whatever. You may come up with a cute little system in your classroom for you and that child that works. It could be just as simple as you going, and that is the way the child knows, oh, I need to get back to work. That might work for you guys. Okay? When socializing with peers and adults, what are some strengths and weaknesses? All right. We need to also know, because when we're doing IEPs, we're not only looking at academics or language skills, but we're also looking at independent functioning and we're looking at behavioral. And maybe a child has an issue with adults, or maybe a child does better with adults and does worse with children. We want to make sure that we are servicing the whole child. So if a child needs some support in behavioral or independent functioning, we want to be able to touch on that. Does the student get frustrated when working on hard assignments? I mean, I know. Come on, Peridot. Everybody gets frustrated when working on hard assignments. We all do. There's plenty of times we've all wanted to take our laptop and throw it out the door. I get it. But what does that frustration look like? Is the child just sitting there going and stopping? Is the child slamming their fist? Is the child throwing a pencil? Is the child yelling out? Is the child flipping the desk? Hopefully no child is flipping the desk. But what does it look like when they get frustrated? That also will help us, again, directing that behavioral aspect of the child. Does the student, and that's a yes or no question. You either mark, if you mark yes, what does it look like? If it's no, and the child seems to handle it just fine, then you're done. The next one, does the child turn assignments in on time? Again, that's an independent functioning skill that is addressed on the IEP. If the child is struggling with turning in the assignments late, maybe jotting a note down on there. I see the student working on the assignments, but the assignments never make it to me. Okay, so then maybe we need to help the child with a process of turning in. Maybe they need a checklist of, okay, I did it. Now I need to turn it in. Okay, something like that. Is it that the child isn't turning it in because they're just not even doing it? We need to kind of know that information. Is the student organized? Clean desk, agenda, backpack. We all know, especially in the older grades, organization is crucial, especially when they start getting into that middle school age, that they need to be able to stay on top of their classes. They're doing 6 classes, y'all. We need to know, are they organized? Does the student use most of the grammar rules correctly? They're children. They're learning. I know plenty of us as adults that do not use grammar rules correctly all the time. But do they do it most of the time? Especially for our language babies. We are really looking to see, do they grasp the language? Is the student able to get his or her ideas out clearly when speaking? Again, this is looking more at our speech babies. But it could be for a child who's ADHD, that whenever they're talking, they start rambling so fast that you can't really understand them. And then you're like, oh my goodness, right? Can they get themselves out clearly? Or when they're trying to say something and they're, like stopping, like, but when I'm talking, you get the, that means they cannot get their thoughts out clearly. It could be related to their disability, and it's something we need to look at and assess. And how are you providing your accommodations for the student? All right. Number 11 ties back to that binder that we talked about in the ESC binder video. If you're logging your accommodation logs, ladies and gentlemen, you can bring those right to me. You can put in here specifically, I provide a seat at the teacher's desk when the student is working on test. I provide a timer for Joey whenever he needs a break. Something to that effect. and then you bring your binder with you. Any assessments that you would like added onto the IEP, NWEA, iReady assessments, and chapter assessments, anything that you think would be beneficial to show us how the child is doing. And then there's a section, half of the second page is only for speech and language. So if you have a child and the child is not labeled SI, you do not have to worry about this SI section. If you have a child who's labeled LI, then you would do it. But if they're not labeled LI, then you don't have to worry about this section. This latter half is for Miss Bellevue. All right. So I'm going to quickly go over them. They're really easy yes/no questions. Are you able to understand the student within the classroom setting? That's for our speech babies. If yes, you're fine. If no, if you can specifically say, hey, I'm noticing that they're really struggling when we have the CH sound or the S sound. I mean, Miss Bellevue is fabulous and she already knows a lot of this stuff, but she wants to see, is it still carrying over into the classroom? Does the student's peers understand him or her? Does the student get frustrated when he or she isn't understood? And what does that look like? So if your child is trying to get something out and they're getting mad, coming from a background of deaf ed, deaf kiddos get really upset because they try and they try and they try to get their point across and nobody understands them. And they will throw massive temper tantrums. They'll throw themselves on the floor. They'll throw things. They'll hit things. They'll grab something and shove it in your face. Children who struggle with getting their thoughts out tend to get frustrated. We do that sometimes. She needs to know how that's happening and what that looks like. Then we look into the language section. Does the student have trouble following spoken direction? Yes or no? If you say, well, I can give them 1-step direction, but when I start going into 2 and 3 steps, they struggle. You can put underneath it, yes, and then underneath you can still put only for 1-step directions or only for up to 2 steps. That gives her an idea. Oh, I need to work on multiple step directions. Does the student use a variety of vocabulary when speaking, especially grade appropriate? All right. Is your kindergartner still talking like a 3-year-old? Do they use yeah, or good, and they don't have a wide range of variety of language? And then is the student able to listen to a story and interpret the meaning? Again, that's going with that cognitive comprehension skill. We work on that in the ESC side, but the speech pathologist works with that on the language side as well. So she needs to know that information. Super easy paper. You will get one of these for every IEP 504 you're going to have. If you want to get ahead of yourself and you say, oh, I see Miss Peridot just put a calendar invite for Johnny, you can pull this up in your documentation tab in Teams, download it to a Word doc. You can type it in and email it to your ESC teacher before they even give it to you if you want to. That's fine. If you're like, oh, I've got a few minutes, let me do this, and send it to them, you now have access to this paperwork without having to wait for the ESC teacher to give it to you. So if you know an IEP is coming up in a week or 2 or 3, you could do that. We have to have a rough draft of the IEP to the parents 5 days before the IEP. So this is why it's so crucial that we get this paperwork done ASAP. So like I said, if you need access to it, you've got it in Teams. You can ask the ESC team for it, whichever way you prefer. All right. Thank you for your information. Thank you for your help in supporting this team for our children. And go Lions!